In the village of Mapindo, where the hills rolled gently and the mango trees shaded the earth like mothers cradling their children, lived a man named Bwana Mago. He was a man whose name could buy silence or start a market rumor with a single whisper. Everyone in Mapindo knew him, not just because he was rich, but because he was feared and respected in equal measure. His compound was the only one with 2 stone houses. His cattle drank from a private well. His wives had once worn matching kangas from Mombasa. And his granaries, 5 in total, stood taller than any man in the village, always full, even in the seasons when rain forgot its promise. But if you ever said the word will near Bwana Mago, you would see his eyes flash like lightning behind storm clouds. "Don't ever say that word near me," he would growl. "That word is like calling death with a song. I still have strength in my bones. I am not going anywhere." People tried to reason with him. His oldest friends, even his brother, spoke gently. "Mago, you are not a young man. Your children need to know." But he would tap his chest proudly. "As long as this heart beats, I will not write a will. I will not invite the grave to my doorstep." So he lived, growing older and richer, but never wiser in that one thing. His land stretched past the baobab tree. His goats filled the valley with bleating. And yet, for all his power, he was blind to the truth everyone else could see. Even kings must one day close their eyes. And when they do, what they leave behind can either build a home or burn it down. Bwana Mago had 4 children, 3 sons and a daughter. And though his barns were full, his house was not full of peace. His children had grown up in the shade of his greatness, but they had also grown up watching, waiting, measuring his footsteps like vultures circling quietly in the sky. The firstborn son, Mumo, was tall and broad like a bull, proud and loud. He believed everything would naturally belong to him because he was born first. The land near the river? Mine. The cows with the spotted hides? Mine. Even the stone house with the veranda? "I will sit there as father sits now," he often said, sipping tea loudly as if he already owned the cup. The second son, Kamto, was quiet, observant. He did not speak much, but he remembered everything: who cleaned the barns, who fetched the sick cow, who stayed behind when everyone else danced at the festival. He believed his faithfulness would reward him. The third, Simba, was the gentle one. Kind-hearted but soft-spoken, he stayed out of the fights. He helped their aging mother in the garden, patched the leaking roof when no one else bothered, and visited his father in the evening to tell him about the day's work. Their sister, Achieng, had married and moved to another village. Though she had no claim to the land, she always said, "Whatever you do, do not let our father's name become dust after he dies." But the sons did not listen to her, or each other. Even while their father was still breathing, they whispered. They counted cows. They argued over pieces of land using broken sticks on the sand behind the house. Yet not one of them dared ask their father to divide his wealth. He had warned them. He had warned everyone. "Mention a will," he said, "and you're feeding death." So they waited, and whispered, and sharpened their teeth in silence. One evening, as the sun laid gold across the rooftops of Mapindo, a familiar figure walked slowly up the path to Bwana Mago's compound. It was Baba Mwangi, the oldest elder in the village, his back bent like a question mark, his walking stick tapping against the ground like a ticking clock. Bwana Mago was seated on a carved stool, sipping fermented porridge and watching the cows return from the hills. His dogs barked once, then lay back down. When he saw Baba Mwangi, he smiled politely, but his eyes narrowed. "I know why you've come," he said, before the old man even sat. Baba Mwangi chuckled. "Then you must also know I won't leave without speaking." Mago waved to a younger boy. "Bring the elder a stool and a cup." They sat together in silence for a while, as men of age often do, letting the crickets sing and the air cool. Then Baba Mwangi began. "In our father's days, when a man grew old, he would gather his children under the fig tree. He would speak each name, each cow, each parcel of land. Everyone would hear, and there would be peace when the drum stopped beating. "I am not that old," Mago said, setting down his cup. "You are not young either," the elder replied gently. "You walk slower than before. You forget names. Your voice no longer carries across the field. Mago, your tree has borne fruit. Will you let it fall and rot without telling which fruit belongs to which child?" Mago looked away, jaw tight. "I don't fear anything," he said. Baba Mwangi leaned in. "Then prove it. Write a will." The rich man stood suddenly, lifting his walking stick. "I will not. I will not call death with my own mouth. I still have many days." Baba Mwangi sighed, stood slowly, and walked away. But he knew. He knew the drum would soon stop beating. It happened on a quiet morning, the kind where even the birds seemed to sing softer than usual. The rooster crowed. The sun stretched over the acacia trees. The cows lowed, waiting to be untied. But something was off in Bwana Mago's compound. His door was still closed. His wife, Mama Rehema, knocked gently. "Mago, the tea is ready." No answer. She pushed the door and peeked in. There he was, lying still, eyes closed, mouth slightly open as if he was just about to speak. But no breath came, no snore, no rustle of the mat. "Mago!" she called, shaking his shoulder. Nothing. She screamed. By midday, the whole village knew. Bwana Mago, the man who never wanted to speak of death, had been claimed by it in the silence of his own sleep. His sons rushed in. Mumo came first, sweat on his brow, already whispering to the neighbors. "He told me once about the cows. I know which ones were meant for me." Kamto followed, his face tight, his fingers already counting the granaries in his head. Simba arrived last, eyes red, and sat quietly near the doorway, his grief real, his heart heavy. Achieng came by sundown, with her baby tied to her back. She wept not just for the man, but for the storm she knew was coming. That night, the village gathered to mourn. Fires were lit, drums beat softly. Stories were told of Bwana Mago's early days, how he built his wealth, how he bought his first cow with a handful of coins and a prayer. But when the elder asked, "Did he leave any instructions?" all heads turned to his family. Simba stood. "No, he never spoke of it. He said talking about a will would bring death." Now death had come, and left no instructions. By the third day after Bwana Mago's burial, sorrow gave way to suspicion. Grief turned to glances. Long silences hung between the brothers like mosquito nets full of holes. Mumo, the firstborn, wasted no time. "That land near the river? Baba always meant for it to be mine. He said I was the only one who could manage the soil." Kamto, arms crossed, answered coldly. "He also told me the cows were my responsibility. You think herding them for years was a favor?" Simba looked between them. "Can't we wait? We've just buried him. Shouldn't we mourn a little longer?" "Mourning won't feed anyone," Mumo snapped. "Don't act like you're better because you cry." The next morning, smoke curled into the sky. The grain stores, those 5 proud towers of Bwana Mago's legacy, were on fire. Villagers ran with buckets. Women screamed. Children stood wide-eyed. But it was too late. The millet, the sorghum, the dried maize, gone. Nothing left but black ash and questions. "Who would do this?" asked one neighbor. Another whispered, "Maybe it's the sons. Maybe someone wanted to leave the others with nothing." Simba sat on a stone, staring at the smoke. This wasn't what Baba wanted," he murmured. "I know it wasn't." Kamto didn't answer. Mumo was already shouting at the herdsmen, accusing them of carelessness. That night, Achieng packed her things and returned to her husband's home. As she tied her child onto her back, she said quietly, "Father left behind cows and curses." The stone house that once stood proud now felt like a crumbling ruin. The trees seemed to lean away from it. The air was heavy, as though the land itself was ashamed. In Mapindo, people began to say, "A man who fears the will leaves behind a fire." And in Mago's case it was true, both in spirit and in smoke. 3 days after the grain stores burned, the village elders gathered under the old fig tree, the place where matters of great weight were always settled. It was time to hear the case of Bwana Mago's inheritance, or rather, the mess he left behind. The sons were called. Mumo arrived with his chest high and eyes sharp. Kamto came with a folded paper and a list of things he claimed were his. Simba, quiet as always, carried nothing but a small gourd of water. The villagers circled around, some seated on logs, others standing in the shade, all eager to hear what the elders would say. Mwangi, the oldest elder and voice of the ancestors, cleared his throat. When a man dies, his voice goes silent, but if he leaves no words, then his children must dig through silence with sticks. We are here to prevent blood. He turned to the sons. "Did your father speak to any of you about his property?" Kamto answered first. "He told me the cows were mine. I have cared for them since I was a boy." Mumo snorted. "He told me the land was mine. I am the eldest, and by our tradition, it should come to me." Simba looked down. "He told me nothing. He only said not to mention the will, that it would call death." Mwangi sighed deeply and shook his head. "Then the curse is not death, it is silence." Tradition required a solution. Calabashes filled with water were passed around. Each brother was to dip their finger and speak a truth. But truth did not flow. Mumo shouted. Kamto argued. Simba begged them to stop. "We must divide it," said another elder. "But without his word, there will be no peace." And so the meeting ended with nothing decided, only tension growing thicker, and peace slipping further away. Seasons changed in Mapindo. The rains came, then left. The grass grew, then withered. But the house of Bwana Mago, once the pride of the village, stood like a haunted shell. What used to be full of laughter and the sound of clanging pots and pans now sat in silence, windows broken, doors left ajar. The goats no longer came close, even the birds stopped nesting on its roof. The villagers began to whisper. "That house has no walls," they said, not because it didn't have bricks, but because it had no peace, no love, no unity, just broken memories. Mumo tried to stay. He claimed the main house and chased away Simba with a cane. But the workers refused to take orders. The cows became thin. Some disappeared. Others fell sick. When the vet came, he asked for payment. Mumo had nothing. Kamto took what little grain he could salvage from the burnt stores and sold it in the next town. But before he could invest the money, thieves broke into his hut one night and vanished with the pouch he had hidden under his bed. Simba stayed in the servants' quarters behind the compound. He planted sukuma and maize near the fence, but strangers kept cutting his stalks at night. Still, he remained, watering the soil, feeding the chickens, lighting a lamp each evening as if to remind the house that someone still cared. Their sister Achieng never returned. In her husband's home, she told her children, "That house is cursed. Never ask me about it." And Mwangi, the elder, watched it all from a distance. One day he muttered, "A house without a will becomes a house without walls, and a house without walls cannot hold a name." Mapindo moved on. The market grew. New houses were built. But the house that once ruled the valley, it became a warning, not a memory, a warning. Years passed. Children who once played near Bwana Mago's compound now crossed the road when they reached it, as if the air there whispered arguments into their ears. The place where maize once grew thick now held thorny bushes. The old gate leaned sideways like a drunk man with no one to hold him up. But Mapindo did not forget. One day, in a different part of the village, old Mzee Barasa, a respected herbalist, began to fall ill. He had 5 children and more cows than he could count, and his wives had long begged him to divide his things. Like Mago, Barasa had always said, "My children know what is theirs. I will not invite death by putting it on paper." But the memory of Bwana Mago still lingered. So when Mwangi came to visit him, yes, the same elder who once warned Mago, he did not come with riddles or proverbs. He came with a folded piece of paper and a black pen. He sat beside Barasa's mat and said plainly, "You are not the first man to think silence protects you. But silence is not protection. It is a matchstick next to dry grass." Barasa looked at his feet. "You still remember Mago?" "Mapindo remembers," Mwangi said softly. "His house still stands, but his name has collapsed." That night, Barasa gathered his children. Under the mango tree, with the moon watching like a witness, he spoke each child's name, each cow, each plot of land. He did not wait for death to press his tongue still. He spoke, he wrote, and peace entered his compound like a warm breeze. And in that moment, Mwangi leaned on his walking stick and smiled to himself. The drum of wisdom had finally spoken again, and this time someone had listened. By now, the story of Bwana Mago had become a tale parents told their children when the lanterns were low and the crickets sang in the bushes. But it was not a story told with laughter. It was told with sighs and slow headshakes. "In the days of our fathers," they would begin, "there lived a man with 2 stone houses, 5 granaries, and a voice louder than thunder. But that man feared one thing more than poverty. He feared the word will." Children would blink and ask, why? Because he believed saying it would call death closer. But death comes whether you whisper or shout. And so, in Mapindo, things began to change. Young men who returned from the city now sat with their mothers and asked, "What belongs to who, Mama?" Old men who once kept secrets in their chests began to pull out yellowing papers, scribbling names, stamping thumbprints. Even the village chief, a man who owned land that bordered 3 rivers, gathered his sons under the tamarind tree one Saturday and divided everything in front of witnesses. "Let no brother raise his voice against another when I am gone," he said. "Let peace be my final gift." Mwangi, now slower and grayer, was often invited to speak at weddings and funerals. But it was at naming ceremonies where he gave his most important message. "When you plant a tree," he would say, "you must also decide who will harvest the fruit. If not, your children will fight under its branches and spill more blood than water." The tale of Bwana Mago, who feared the will and left behind smoke and sorrow, became the soil from which wisdom grew. And in every homestead that chose to speak before silence, peace found its way through the gate. So, dear listener, if you have land or cows, or even just a family who loves you, speak. While your tongue is still warm and your breath still stirs the air, speak, for the dead cannot explain, and a house without a will is a house with no walls. Let this be your lesson and not your story. Folktales connect us to our past, shape our present, and guide our future. African Folktales by Kavovi is more than just storytelling. It's a bridge between yesterday and tomorrow, between tradition and modernity. Subscribe now and be part of the journey. Like, comment, and share to help keep these stories alive. This is African Folktales by Kavovi, where the past speaks and the future listens.